It's a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Ja Morant slightly trolling, maybe not quite so slight, Grizzlies Twitter over his current soreness, questionable for tonight's game against the Bulls. We'll preview that contest and talk about the Grizzlies having some third quarter troubles, performing well at times, except for that really rough stretch in the third frame of games. We'll talk about it all and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Ja Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my wonderful co-host of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Damichael Cole. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I am a Grizz lead contributor this season, and we both are your hosts for Locked On Grizzlies each and every time that an episode drops. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a bet, and they can find themselves with getting started at $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Go and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also, friendly reminder that we have a team newsletter now. Very excited about that. Your favorite podcast, Locked On Grizzlies, has a newsletter, the Locked On Grizzlies Daily Newsletter. It's a one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage right in your inbox every day. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. Again, we're free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you get a podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, literally anywhere, visual, audio, everything in between. Make Damichael and I a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time an episode drops. Become an everydayer if you haven't already done so. Damichael, it's good to see you again. You look a little more traveled, a little more wise from your miles on the road. Hopefully you had a good trip, and I know it's good to be back in Memphis. You're going to be there for the foreseeable future. The team has a little homestand going on now, which is nice. But we're only a halfway through their 6 games and 9 nights, right, to start off the season. They are 2-1, if I'm not mistaken, through 3 games, right? 2-1. Yes.
2-1. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Don't scare me like that, partner. Goodness gracious.
2-1.
Whew. So I feel like more often than not, if the team was 2-1 after a 3-game and 4-night stretch, we would be pretty happy about that. Right.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, Grizzlies fans, I don't know, maybe every season we just become more anxious. We get filled with more angst, whatever the case might be. It seems like there's unrest. And one of the major reasons there is such unrest is the early season rotations of Taylor Jenkins, the acknowledgement of the 6 games and 9 nights to start the season. Ja Morant maybe not playing as many minutes. He's questionable for tonight's game against the Bulls due to thigh soreness. Lots of uncertainty around how the team is handling this brutal stretch to start the season. I'm curious, I know you spoke with Ja Morant. He made a joke about listening to Grizz Twitter and how that's the reason he played. And obviously he's being sarcastic, right? It's more so making sure fans understand that these guys are still online. They may not be tweeting or posting as much as they used to, but they are still a very online group. They see things, they know what's being said. And I'm curious, because you know the team just about as good, if not better than anybody. Are you worried about the way that Taylor Jenkins is handling this thing? Because for me personally, I think it's a fair criticism, and at the very least, a fair thing to ask questions about. But the team's 2-1. If they were 0-3 at this stage, I would be ranting and raving until the cows came home. But Jay Huff, who we probably need to talk more about on tomorrow's episode, is having a really impressive start to the season. The depth of this team is perhaps even more impressive than we were giving them credit for to start the season. The Orlando Magic are not a slouch. That's a good basketball.
They had 2 double-digit wins ahead of that game.
And on a second night of a back-to-back against a team that they should have beaten in the Houston Rockets, they were up big in that game. We'll talk more about that later on in the show. Things fall apart again. It was not just a display of the depth; it was a display of the mental toughness. So I feel like we're not looking at this the right way, in my opinion. I think that we should be happy that the team is 2-1, given what is happening to them. I'm one of the most verbal folks talking about how Ja Morant should be playing 34 to 36 minutes a night. I say that almost daily here on this podcast. But this is a unique circumstance. This is a guy who is coming off of an injury in his own right in the preseason. This is a guy who is so vital to what this team is going to be, not just right now, but in April and in May, hopefully in June. If this guy is not on the court, none of it matters. So if this is what they feel is the best way to handle things in the here and now, given the current slate of games, as long as they're competing, not even necessarily winning, but as long as they're competing, as the cavalry comes in the next few weeks, hopefully with Vince Williams Jr. and others, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I don't see what the big deal is, or if there's a big deal with, Ja's minutes or whatever the case may be, because here's the thing, you outlined one part. Ja missed preseason time and all of that. I think the reason that people who do feel some type of way about the minutes distribution so far, that's kind of a preconceived notion based on the last 2 to 3 years. You've seen Ja Morant average around 32 minutes, while other star point guards in the league would be playing 35 minutes. And that's kind of been the case. And Taylor Jenkins has always been a more of a, play depth and then shorten his rotation late in the regular season for in the playoffs and things like that. But the way basketball goes in general, early in the season is when you build depth, right? That's when everyone's get the chance to play. That's when you're like, okay. Like a guy like Jalen Wells. If everyone was playing right now, he probably wouldn't even have a chance. And now Jalen Wells looks solid. Like, you could tell it's still going to take some time for him to be consistent, but he's rookie. But he looks solid. Like, he's not making a lot of mistakes out there. So you're putting guys out there and you're letting them, get opportunities. Jay Huff, right? He's one guy who's definitely taking advantage of all the extra minutes. Scottie Pippen Jr. Look, Ja in his last game played around 24, 25 minutes and had 16 and 10. Scottie Pippen Jr. came off the bench, played just about as many minutes as him, and had 12 assists. So he is getting an extended opportunity to show what he brings to the table. At the end of the day, if it doesn't really come at the expense of the team, you can make an argument that in that Houston game, Ja, in that game, he was out for he played 12 minutes in the first half. I know some people definitely had problems with that. It was definitely a little confusing on my part, but I think, learning the reasons after the game pretty much cleared everything up for me. And Ja, for one, in the second quarter of the Houston Rockets game, we're talking about when he played 12 minutes in the first half, and then the second half, he ended up playing 12 minutes. But in the first half, Ja was the one who asked to come out of the game. We talked about it on the podcast. I've said it on the podcast. I remember at the end of the preseason when Ja played that last game, I think it was against the Heat, right before the preseason ended, and he was coming out in the third quarter. Joe, he was walking off the floor. He untucked his jersey, and he said, "I'm tired." And this was the last preseason game. This was after roughly 20 of game action. So I don't think it wouldn't have been wise to expect a guy who was tired after playing, a decent amount of 3/4 of a preseason game to come in the regular season opener and just boom, 35 minutes. Like, not at the pace that the Grizzlies want to play. And that's another thing. Like, they want to play at this up-tempo style, right? So when you combine all those factors, missing time, this up-tempo style of play, and then just develop in depth. Because if you don't develop in depth now, you're not going to be trying to do it in March when you're in the playoff run. You're like, oh, let me get Jalen Wells some minutes here while the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Denver Nuggets are one game behind us and we're fighting for, a top 3 seed, a top 6 seed, or whatever the case may be. So you do that now. You develop the depth. So later on in the season, you can have a firm 9-10-man rotation, and the Grizzlies are doing that. So my answer to everyone that's complaining about the minute distribution of Ja is I think you would be satisfied with what you've seen from, Santi Aldama, Scottie Pippen Jr., and Jay Huff as 3 guys who particularly taken advantage of those extra minutes.
Yeah, I'll tell you somebody who hasn't taken advantage of it is Zach Edey. We'll have to talk about him at some point as well. It's very early for him, but a very slow start to his NBA career.
Fouls are getting them, yeah.
When you're not the best rookie on your team at the time, right? Again, it's literally October 28th. So I want to stress that. Purdue people, don't scream at me. I'm totally cool with Zach Edey. So I do want to point out how Donovan Clingan.
You're trying to get him riled up.
I do want to point out that Donovan Clingan is doing some interesting things in Portland. I'm just going to say
looking good. He's looking good, Joe.
Throw it out there. I was told on numerous occasions I don't know ball, and he's playing pretty well out there in Portland. Just throwing that out there. But again, even with that being said, I'm still cool with Zach Edey. I like Zach Edey. that transition has clearly kind of taken a turn these first couple of games, not getting as much run as perhaps we thought he would. Wells playing well, right? And Jay Huff, again, shout out to the Wahoo, just really
good.
doing remarkable things for the team. Memphis just probably should trade away all their first-round picks from now on. That's where they get in trouble, maybe.
Don't need them.
It's the second round in the G League. That's where they need to focus their energies. In all seriousness, those were all jokes. Everybody relax. Let Damichael and I know, are you worried about Ja? I'm not worried. Damichael's not worried. Doesn't mean that Taylor Jenkins is beyond reproach. I believe, Damichael, you put out an article in which you asked Jenkins and you asked Ja about these things. So we have a beat writer that is also a co-host here on Locked On Grizzlies that's asking these questions. They're fair ones. But after hearing the response, I'm with Damichael. I'm not as worried about it, just like he's not. Let us know in the comments or on X how you guys are feeling about it. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. I'm a big fan of FanDuel. I know Damichael is as well. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. That's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL. I've been waiting for this one, partner. So let's just say you have a hunch. Let's just say you have dude. And the Commanders go down. They're down by 3. What are they going to do? I think the Commanders, I
knew you were coming with this.
I believe at the end of the game that they're going to find a way to get it.
He won me some money too, Joe.
The live stats, the latest information, live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Trust your hunch. Bet on Jaden Daniels because that guy is, what do the kids say? Him? He's him. Go visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch on Jaden Daniels in particular, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. That Jaden Daniels guy, he makes me want to do Locked On Commanders. I'm not going to lie. Woo. Now, I would still stay with you, partner. I'm just saying I would add to the work.
Don't leave me now.
He's Jaden Daniels. Goodness gracious. Hey, FanDuel.com. Check him out. So the Grizzlies have looked good throughout the season so far. They have dominated. That first half against the Orlando Magic, I've been watching this team for over a decade, right? You like to make fun of me for how old I am every once in a while. And it's fair. It's deserved. I razz you every once in a while, so it's cool. That was one of the more impressive halves of basketball I've seen, especially a group that is down 4 rotation players, right? Or numerous rotation players, because Jaren returned against the Magic. So for a group that is down numerous rotation players, for them to compete the way they did, again, the Magic are a good basketball team. They are not a bad team. For the Grizzlies to do what they did was impressive, but then just like the Houston Rockets game before, a game that they lost, it's important to point out that Memphis did beat Orlando, the third quarter they fall apart. So in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, partner, the third quarter has been a position of strength for this team. It's been a time where they've had a lot of success, maybe some halftime adjustments. They get back in games or they build leads.
It was the fourth quarter that was the problem,
Correct. Yes, sir. That's exactly right. Why the third quarter now? Is it happenstance? Is it something that you've noticed? Because, again, you were obviously out there in Utah. You were there for the Rockets game in Houston, obviously opening night at home in FedEx Forum on Saturday. You were there for all of these games. Is there something that you're seeing in terms of what's making these third quarter struggles? Because like I said, it was some of the best basketball I've seen them play in that first half against Orlando, and then the wheels almost completely came off there in the third frame.
Yeah, 2 things have stood out to me, and it's not about the rotations and who's in the game. I know some people want to point out, oh, this guy's coming out of the game, and that's when the run happened, and I don't think it has.
Well, it depends. Is the guy John Conchar?
I don't think it even – that's the reason.
If it's a chance to blame John Conchar, I'm going to take
that's what you want to do. But luckily, the starters start the third quarter, and they play a decent amount of minutes in the third quarter. But here's what I kind of come to conclusion at this point. The number one thing is when you come out of halftime, the Grizzlies, the pace that they play with in the first half hasn't been the same in the second half. And that's because the other team's making adjustments. The other team starts making more shots. And when that team is making more shots, the Grizzlies basically haven't had an answer. Taylor Jenkins before the Magic game, it was, it was one. He had one of those answers where I was like, I guess, where he said, I think I asked him, about the Magic defense. He basically said, if we don't get out and play with pace, and if we let them set their defense, we're going to be in trouble. You know what that sounds like, Nijo? It's two ways you can look at it. If you're the optimistic person, you're like, we play with pace. We play our style of basketball, we win. And that's what the Grizzlies did. They played their style of basketball, they won. But the other side of that was you're basically saying the half-court offense is not good enough to succeed against this caliber of defense. And that's going to be the caliber of defense that you see in playoffs. But that's neither here nor there. So I think the third quarter, you saw some of that when the Magic had the 19-0 run. You definitely saw that against Houston and somewhat against Utah as well. But the other thing that stood out to me, especially in that third quarter against Houston, and because these games have been different in a way, the pace is the number one thing that I've noticed in all three games. The Grizzlies haven't had the same pace in the third quarter, whether it's because, defensively they aren't getting as many stops, or just offensively they're not pushing the tempo at the same level that they are in the first half, probably because guys are still getting their legs under them or whatever the case may be. I know in that Houston game, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane were talking about they kind of went away from their principles, right? They got a little too ISO heavy. And Joe, I think we've talked about this too, like the idea that when they're not pushing the pace, or when they get tired of pushing the pace, they might just say, screw it, pick and roll, top of the key. Let's ISO. Let's get back to the basics.
That has happened a few times.
That's definitely exactly what was happening in that third quarter against Houston. And Ja, fair enough. Ja and Des was the one who pointed it out to me. He said me and Ja had a talk, and they were determined to fix that going into the Orlando game. But the pace was the number one thing, and I'm still concerned about rebounding. And I think in the third quarter, I think against Utah it showed a little bit, but definitely against Houston. Rebounding is not a strength of this team right now, and quite frankly, I don't think it has to be the Jonas Valanciunas and Steven Adams years where the Grizzlies were number one, number two in the league in rebounding. I think with Zach Edey in the picture now, and you got Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4, you got some really good rebounding guards. You should aim to be a top 12 rebounding team. They have not been that yet. I mean, Houston owned them.
No, you're exactly right. They have struggled to this point in the season, and obviously it's still very early in the season. That's important to point out. But the Memphis Grizzlies are not particularly strong in the rebounding category as a team. They currently average 42 rebounds a game. That would put them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, around 20th. Around 20th in the NBA, so that's below average.
Not where they used to be in. Not where they used to be in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's 30 teams in the NBA, so that's not great. I think the Zach Edey issues kind of shine there, right? Because it would be ignorant to say that they didn't take that guy with that idea of him being the rebounder that they needed.
Oh, for sure.
He's young. He's not that young. That's a fair counter. He has dominated at the level of college basketball, but the concern has been his athleticism, his conditioning in this high-paced tempo offense. I think it's more so just him getting comfortable playing the style of basketball. We talked about that a lot, partner. The idea that he is being asked to be something very different in Memphis than he was at Purdue. He's not the focal point. He needs to adjust his mentality and what he is expected of, or what is expected of him, I should say. And obviously, Edey is not to blame for the third quarter issues. I think there was a time he didn't even necessarily start the third quarter, right? Like, that's a guy that you're not going to point and lay the blame for this at his feet. But it's a combination of things. And I do believe that when you're down so many key rotation players, like Jay Huff's a great story. If this team's 100% healthy to start the season, Jay Huff's not playing, right? Like, that's important to understand. And it's great to see. I love Jalen Wells, right? I've talked about him in front of Jake LaRavia, in front of John Conchar. Thankfully, that's been the case so far this season. People like to point out when I'm wrong. There's an example of me being right, and he's doing some good things. But again, if Vince Williams Jr. and G.G. Jackson are healthy, how many minutes has he logged to this point? I would argue 0, right? So I think that context matters in these situations. It's not excuses, it's reasons. They have to be better in these situations. But I agree with Damichael. I'm more worried about the macro rebounding issue, especially if Edie can't stay on the floor, than I am the micro third quarter concerns. Over the span of an 82 game season, that's going to balance itself out. I don't see that being something that's a long-term problem. The rebounding thing, if you look at how this roster is constructed, however, could most certainly be an 82 game issue if they don't get that figured out.
When you look at the roster right now, a lot of the issues that we've pointed out are things that'll be fixed kind of when you get everybody back.
Right.
I don't think people will be complaining as much about the minutes distribution when you're subbing out Marcus Smart for Vince Williams, or and you got Ja, Dez, and Jaren all at full strength, and you have the Luke Kennards and Vince Williams available, and the Gigi Jacksons and whatnot. So we'll see, but yeah, I think some of those things will be fixed in time. But there's no 6'10", 6'11" giant who averages 7, 8, 12 rebounds a game waiting to come back right now.
They're not walking through that door. And the guy that you're probably counting on the most to be that guy is a literal giant, but he's not adjusting to the NBA game at this stage. Doesn't mean he can't come out tonight and have a good performance against the Bulls, which we'll talk about here in a moment. I think it kind of sets up for him to maybe have a decent game tonight. But it's been a slow start, to say the least. So let Damichael and I know what you guys are thinking about the Grizzlies' third quarter concerns. It sounds like we're both on the same page. We're more concerned about the macro rebounding issue than the specifics of when the team kind of loses their lead. So hit us up. Let us know what you're thinking. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Gametime. I love NBA basketball. I love football. I even like the World Series right now. I'm not going to lie, partner. That was extremely entertaining, that game one with the the Grand Slam winning the game in extra innings. There's nothing like live hockey, though. The chill of the ice, the slam of the boards. I love going and watching my Washington Capitals live. Maybe you want to travel to Nashville, check out the Predators. Lots of great ways to make memories with NHL games, and the Gametime app can help you do just that. You can use Gametime Picks, curating easy selections for saving more money on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. You can toggle on the all-in pricing feature to show the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy your tickets. And you can also get the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. The Grizzlies are back in action tonight, Damichael. We were talking about it a moment ago. The Chicago Bulls. An interesting matchup, a chance for Memphis to go 3-1 on the young season. Not quite, JJ Redick, Los Angeles Lakers legends at this stage. Like the hot takes about the Lakers start are just becoming obnoxious at this stage.
Yeah, they got them. They got them another Phil Jackson, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like JJ Redick is Red Auerbach and Phil Jackson's love child, or something like that. We'll see, right? It's a long season. That's important to point out. But the Grizzlies have a chance against Chicago to improve to 3-1. What are some things that you think Memphis has to do? I have a feeling I know what number one's going to be. We just talked about it a moment ago. What are some things that Memphis has to do to ensure that they are in a spot to be 3-1 at the end of this evening?
Yeah, you said it. So I won't harbor on this one too long. But rebounding, you're going against Vucevic here, who's going to be physical. He's going to be demanding in the paint. I think this is another game. This where Jaren will have an advantage. This is a Jaren Jackson Jr. game. Jaren probably will still be at around 27, 28 minutes, given if it's a close game or whatever the case may be. But the Bulls, they don't have the size at the 4 spot to contend with Jaren. And that's not to say they're small. Pretty much no one does, really. It's probably a couple teams in the league that do. But with that being said, I'm looking forward to seeing Zach Edey respond, right? We saw he was the only player on the Grizzlies team in that last game against Orlando who had a negative plus-minus at the end of the game because of the foul trouble that he dealt with. And even when the Grizzlies got going, Taylor Jenkins just went away from him. It was like, well, look, this Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr. trio is working. And then Jay Huff came in and gave you big minutes. So there was really no need for Zach Edey at that point. So this is a response type game. I think we've seen 3 games from him so far. One was solid. The other 2 was below average. So this is a chance to kind of get back going in the right direction. I think Zach Edey is right up there with Jaren. Jaren has the mismatches in this game. Those are 2 things that really stand out to me. But that Bulls backcourt too. Looking forward to how the Grizzlies match up and guard them. Taylor Jenkins has pointed this out more than I have, and a thing that the Grizzlies have struggled with a lot this season so far is staying in front of guards. That was something that I talked about before the season. But Taylor Jenkins has basically said their on the ball defense has not been great to this point, and it's allowing for a lot of drives, which is allowing
They foul entirely too much.
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
reaching.
And guess what? You got Kobe White and Zach LaVine, 2 guys who are capable of going for 40 coming in the building in this one. So I know when people see Bulls and they just sleeping snoozer, but Ja Morant is questionable. I mean, I feel like he'll play, but we'll see, how that works out. And you got Jaren Jackson Jr. still going to be limited minutes wise there. And I think with all those things factored in, Marcus Smart will probably guard Zach LaVine, maybe. He may get Kobe White, depending on who you feel is the more ball dominant player of the 2. But that's going to be 3 biggest keys for me. I want to see Zach Edey, how he handles this matchup with Vucevic. The Grizzlies on the glass. Can you at least be even with Chicago in this game? And then perimeter pressure and defense, because that's one thing where they'll get some help back with that when Vince Williams gets back. But with the guys there right now, you got 2 really talented Chicago Bulls scorers and Zach LaVine and Kobe White coming to FedEx Forum.
I think you ride the hot hand of the reserves, which is wild to say out loud. I never thought I would argue for Jay Huff to keep getting.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. You knew you would one day. When you saw University of Virginia and Wahoo, you knew you.
That would mean somebody got hurt, or in this current situation, somebody's underperforming. In the case of Edey, I don't want Zach Edey to underperform. I want Edey to have success. Sure, yeah, it means something's going on with those guys. I want to see the reserves continue their strong performance because this is Joe Mullinax talking, not Joe and Damichael or me speaking for Damichael. This is my opinion. I think Ja is going to play, and they're keeping him questionable because they have a back-to-back coming up, and he's not going to play one of those games. That's my thought process. They're playing the long game, and it gives them an out. Hey, he's been questionable the last couple of games when he doesn't suit up for one of them, whichever one it might be. I am fairly confident that this reserve unit for Memphis, the way they're currently playing, because again, they did it to the Magic, who are better than the Bulls. Let's not get it twisted. You just talked about Kobe White and Zach LaVine and Vucevic. They've got some talented guys. The Bulls do not have the depth that the Grizzlies do, even in their current state. So I agree with all of your keys. Memphis has to win those reserve minutes. If the starters can play the Bulls starters even in their current state, and they can get to the reserves and the reserves can build a lead, to me, that is how you avoid a third quarter swoon and you have a steady incline towards a hopefully double-digit victory, as opposed to holding on for dear life at the end as things kind of tumble out of control. I'm looking for the reserves to keep their hot streak going.
Yeah, I like that. I forget who said this, but someone used to say it when the Jamaican 4x1 team used to race, and they used to say when Usain Bolt, he was the anchor leg. If we're even, he's leaving. At that point. So you're basically saying if the starters are even, the bench should be leaving, and leading the Grizzlies to a W in that case. So I'm with it, but I think Scottie Pippen Jr. is another guy you can say continue to build upon his strong performance. That was a 12 assist game for him, and he's really starting to figure it out. He's playing with pace too. I don't know if you've noticed, but he's been the first sub off the bench. Like, they're going Ja Morant and Scottie Pippen Jr. He's not been subbing for. He's been subbing for Bane, and they go Ja Morant and Scottie Pippen Jr. like as a two guard point guard thing for a little while, and it's been interesting to see. So Taylor is mixing and matching with these different lineup combinations and whatnot. But yeah, I definitely think the game will be won with how you guard those guys on the perimeter. And we should be talking tomorrow somewhere about how the Grizzlies made some type of improvement with the way that they're rebounding the basketball.
Yes, and that is the hope for our Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I'll be flying solo for that episode. Damichael will be there at FedEx Forum covering the game for the commercial appeal. So I'll have the game solo, or at least the episode solo. I'm sure I'll talk to Damichael, get some juicy tidbits for things that we can discuss. But hopefully it's better rebounding. Hopefully it's a better Zach Edey performance. And most importantly, hopefully it's another Grizzlies win that we get to talk about on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being with us on this edition of the show. Again, make sure you're subscribing to the Locked On Grizzlies daily newsletter. That's right. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter, a one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you are getting your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast. You can check out Damichael and I on Locked On Grizzlies. We are so grateful to our everydayers and everybody that is with us along for this ride. It's been a successful first month of the season, and we look forward to continuing to building and growing Locked On Grizzlies. For my wonderful partner, Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. I will catch you guys back here tomorrow. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Give us some nice words, some good feedback. We appreciate it. Hopefully we're talking about a win the next time you lock in.